Hello, Redlands students. Today we had our first class for business law. I just wanted to touch base with you and follow up, highlight a few things, and give you some advice about next week. We had about 100% attendance in the two sessions today. That's fantastic, I think, and I'm glad it worked as well as it did with comparatively few technical glitches. And thank you for attending and for posting your self-introduction to the Flipgrid site. We had almost everybody do that before class 2, so I'm sure the rest of you will finish that today. And good job on that. It's helpful to me to see your faces and hear you say your names and get to know a little bit about your background. I encourage everybody to look through those. Two sections are intermingled in there, so not everybody in the Flipgrid site is going to be in your particular section, but you'll recognize 28 or so people who are, and the other ones you may know from other contexts, but I would encourage you to watch all those videos as well. I made a few adjustments to the syllabus based on what we did today. Rather than ask you to read chapter 1 and 3 for Tuesday, I just moved chapter 1 to Tuesday and chapter 3 on Thursday. So that's your reading assignment for next week. You do absolutely need to read the piece on how to brief a case. As I said in one of the sections, that's the cheat sheets, the cheat codes for this class. All through the semester, we're going to be reading case after case after case. And this guide will help you understand how to extract the value from them. And there's an implicit structure in all of them where they tell you the story of the conflict between the parties. Then they tell you the history of the litigation. Usually we'll be reading an appellate court decision, so there was some decision in a lower court, maybe at a trial court and an appellate court, and then we'll be reading a U.S. or state Supreme Court opinion. So you'll want to understand both the facts, what happened in the dispute between the parties, and then the legal facts, the history of it. Then they'll tell you the legal question that's presented, the law that is in play, and then they'll apply the facts to the law and reach a conclusion and give you the reasons for it. And that's sort of an implicit structure for every opinion. And you'll be, by the end of the semester, really good at reading legal opinions and knowing that. The first time you do it, it can be very confusing, so that article on how to read a legal opinion will be very helpful to you to understand it. And then you'll even get it better when we read chapter 3 and you understand more about the way courts are structured, the difference between state and federal courts, and the different layers from trial courts to Supreme Courts, the highest court in any given jurisdiction. Although everybody was there today, sometimes it's helpful to hear something a second time, or a few of you didn't manage to make it to class. So just let me review very briefly what we talked about. I had asked you in your self-introductory videos to say, why do you think every business school in America basically requires students to take business law? As I said in one section, that's been true for 100 years since the University of Pennsylvania started the first MBA program. They've had law classes in their business curriculum. And a lot of you gave good reasons. I said that the main reason I think business people would say you have to pay attention to laws because you don't want to get in trouble. You have to comply with regulations. You don't want to get sued and lose. You don't want to go to jail. You want to lose a permit. That it's a sort of burden. It's a compliance burden and a cost, and that's true. Law does constrain what businesses can do, right? You can't engage in false advertising. You can't make up stuff or omit stuff if you're a publicly traded company that could affect the stock price. You can't steal from your own company. You can't commit fraud and lie to people. There's a lot of rules that you have to follow, anti-discrimination laws. There's just a whole universe of things you do need to do to stay out of trouble. But that's not all. And today, the main thing we did in class was we talked about the way law not only burdens and constrains business, but empowers it. And our main example was the case of Larry Page and Sergey Brin, who started Google when they were about your age and became multi-billionaires through the success of that company. But to get from idea stage, garage sort of light bulb going on stage, creative, innovative idea, to becoming a thriving business and having stock that made them so personally wealthy, they engaged in venture capital transactions, right? And we looked at that deal when somebody gives money to an entrepreneur and the entrepreneur gives back stock as an exemplification of how law makes business possible. We saw how venture capitalists typically don't know in a personal way the people that they're investing in. They didn't know their parents. They didn't go to the same church or synagogue or play tennis at the same country club. But they believed that they could profit from investing in the idea. And that transaction had several assumptions. Property rights, that the preferred shares that were created in the deal and given to the investor in exchange for their cash, that's a valuable thing, right? That property right would be secure. Another assumption was that the contractual rights, the designations of the preferred shares that were negotiated, that those rights would be enforceable, that you could have a contract between a venture capitalist and an entrepreneur, and that it would be dependable, that it would create rights that could be enforced. And a third is that there's intellectual property that's protectable, that you could either patent or trademark or copyright an idea so that the people you're investing in, the company that you're investing in, would have the right to exploit it and could make money from it. And that if you take out those legal relationships, the whole deal collapses. It doesn't happen, right? People would just do business with people they knew, people that they could depend on, or with governments that they trusted, but they wouldn't do business with strangers. And it's not just between the venture capital fund and the entrepreneur, that the actual constitution of the venture capital fund is a legal arrangement, because institutional investors in the form of insurance companies that collect premium and then invest it before they have to pay out claims, university endowments, and prominently retirement funds all use pools of money collected from strangers. That's a legal relationship. And people do that because they believe that the property rights and the contractual rights are dependable, or they wouldn't give parts of their life savings to strangers. And then there's another legal relationship between typically the fund manager and the people who have invested in the fund, whether it's the venture capital fund or an investment fund. Often the person who runs a hedge fund or a venture capital fund, and in some cases a retirement fund, has a deal where they get what we call a carried interest. So they put in their labor and their expertise in picking high-tech startups or other investments. And then if they perform beyond a certain benchmark, say the average return for the stock market in a given year, everything above that, they may get 20%. The proportion of return they get from the fund isn't proportional to the capital they put in. They get a carried interest. So they get, say, 20% of the returns above a certain benchmark, even though they contributed labor, not capital. The constitution of the fund, among all the teachers and firefighters, professors, nurses, whatever the profession is that contribute to a retirement fund, that relationship between them and the fund is a legal arrangement. Then the fund's investment in the venture capital fund, the retirement fund to the venture capital fund, is a legal transaction. And then the venture capital fund's investment in the startup like Google or YouTube is another legal arrangement. And then there's a legal relationship between people who invest in the fund and the fund manager through this carried interest. One of the things you're going to do to succeed in this class is have a vocabulary list. We're going to learn a lot of new vocabulary. Some of you knew these words before today, but for the rest of you, carried interest, venture capitalist, and institutional investor, and preferred stock are some of the key concepts that you should have written down in your notes and now be able to understand. So what's the relationship between law and business? Professor Hutchins says that it's that if there was no legal system running in the background providing property rights, the ability to order our affairs privately, customize them through a contract, if we didn't have property rights and contracts, if we didn't have the possibility to sue people and assert our contractual and property rights, we wouldn't have stock markets, we wouldn't have venture capital, we wouldn't have retirement funds, and we wouldn't therefore probably have Google and Facebook and Instagram and many of the other things that have shaped our lives. So that was the big idea for today, that the legal system is ubiquitous in business and not just a part of business, but it's actually inseparable from the essence of business, that we don't get the business world that you plan to join post-graduation and thrive in. It literally doesn't exist if we don't have a legal system providing dispute resolution and property rights and contractual rights and intellectual property rights in the background. So that was the big idea for today. Drop a comment on Moodle or on one of the other fora that we have for the class. Send me an email if you have any questions or comments. The thing I wanted to also clarify is, look, there's a default rule. If I don't tell you otherwise, show up for the Zoom session every time we have a regularly scheduled class. Almost everybody was there today. I got a few emails where people said, I'm not sure, where am I supposed to be on Moodle? Or we don't meet on Moodle. We'll never, as far as I know, meet on Moodle. We may meet on WebEx sometimes, Microsoft Teams, and some days I may give you a link to a recorded lecture so that we don't have to all be together at the same place in the same time. But the default rule is meet at the regularly scheduled time for your section via Zoom, unless I tell you otherwise. If you, for some reason, on an occasional basis, can't make it to the time for your section and you want to attend the other one, that's fine. Just log in at the other time. I hope your first week of classes went well. Sorry we're not all enjoying the beautiful weather here in Redlands today. I hope wherever you are, things are good. I know that it can seem like the world has fallen apart between the instances of fires, protest, unjustified, it seems, killing by police, pandemic, the sort of, to me, depressing state of our national politics. Just generally, it seems like the world may be falling apart. I don't think it is. I think that whatever problems we have, we will improve on as a country. I think the world will, again, find the United States early in the years of your career leading the world in terms of innovation and growth. And I hope in terms of providing substantial justice for the vast majority of our citizens and always striving to make the promises of our founding document that all people are created equal and deserve equal treatment under the law, not just a slogan, but a reality. So that's my hope and expectation. So hang in there. If I can help you in any way this semester, you know that I'm ready to do so, and I look forward to learning with you in the weeks ahead.